Hello everyone, welcome to today's video. In today's video, I have a recording of a debate I had with a friend called Kenny, or Zaji as his YouTube name is. At the end of the video I will link Zaji's channel as he has some of his own debates linked there, as well as I'll link some other channels that have some debate records from other friends. This debate was for the Outerversal tournament. The rules of which are on your screen. We'll be using Versus Battle Wiki's attack potency system, and we are capping it only a little bit above the baseline of Outerversal. This means we can't go any higher than baseline Outerversal. The speed cap is irrelevant speed, but we can't speed blitz a relevant speed character. The hexes that were used, or character abilities, are equalized and we cannot layer them. We can only use hexes that fit the definition shown on Versus Battle Wiki. And we're only allowed to switch our character once, which won't apply during a single debate.
My bad. I did not hear you. Okay, sorry. Alright, I'm getting off this shit. Yeah, so, you want me to start, with my character and start with my premise?
Yeah.
Okay, I believe Genichiro Ashina is Outerversal and would kick your character's ass. That's my premise.
Okay. I believe my character won't get touched in this battle whatsoever. I think that's all that needs to be said. And it'll probably use its hacks to fight for you.
Alrighty, so you want me to get this started with my scaling, or do you want to start with yours?
Well, in your premise you mentioned Outerversal AP scaling, so you may as well go over it.
Yeah, so I'd say basically the reason that Genichiro Ashina is Outerversal is because in Sekiro there's a character called Ashina, and he states and mentions how the mortal blade cannot be drawn by any human, or not by any human, but just can't be drawn in general. And both Sekiro and Genichiro wield a mortal blade, meaning that they would contradict this very concept and idea.
Can you elaborate on why that's Outerversal?
You agree? You know what a duality is, right?
Yeah, I know what duality is.
The separation between two contradictory things, right? I believe that dualities are being beyond them, or negating them basically makes you outer.
And also, duality is the balance between them. You're saying your character is a duality that this sword has something.
I'm saying that he basically contradicts the idea that you can't draw this weapon, right? Something stated about the blade, you cannot draw this weapon. He draws and wields the weapon itself.
Is there any catch to why they can't draw it, or is it just that statement? Could you show that statement actually?
Sure, I can show the statement.
Thank you.
Let me get the scan. I have it somewhere. Alrighty. Alrighty. Where do you want me to post it?
That's over there.
Oh, scan zones? Okay.
There's two scan zones, both of them full of what looks like Naruto brothers.
There you go. There's the statement. They say the blade cannot be drawn. This is in context or in contrast to basically when Sekiro was asking Shin about how to sever immortality, right? Which is another thing that the blade can do. It can kill immortal beings, which I would also argue is a contradiction in and of itself. But he asks, how do I sever immortality? Right? He's on the path of immortal severance. And he asks Shin, because Shin is probably one of the most knowledgeable people about the Ashina clan, because Shin is literally the leader of the Ashina clan when they took over via their coup against the shogunate. As a result of that, my bad, he pretty much knows a lot of things about like the land itself, and including the Mortal Blade, because he also tells like Sekiro adequate and accurate information about the Mortal Blade, such as its location, what it does, and what can and cannot be done with it. And all that information seems to be right and accurate. So there would be no reason that we would assume that what he's saying here is genuinely incorrect, when every other piece of information that we have regarding the Mortal Blade that Shin gives us is 100% true.
Cool. Here's a different question.
Sure.
So you say that they can kill mortal beings, which should be a contradiction, and they can wield a sword that can't be wielded, right?
Yep.
So, you sure these characters aren't just so chatty that they just power all these things?
What do you mean by that?
So, like, when something's power node, it's like abilities and stuff are just straight up stock. Been playing Yu-Gi-Oh recently, you know, so I just negate all card effects type of thing.
You'd have to. It's my bad. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Oh, no. I think you get what I mean. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, like, you'd have to be able to demonstrate that. I see no reason for that hypothesis.
Oh, no, the reason why I'm just a suggestion. It's like, why
Well,
would
I mean,
the, outerversal scaling you're implying be more concrete than this one? Like, if you
because mine doesn't need any prerequisites to assume, right? Yours needs a prerequisite to assume. It's just like we oftentimes go or utilize Occam's razor in most situations, right? Otherwise, I can just like also offer almost any alternative that could also be logically possible within like, you know, an argument, such as how can you show that like the English that they're speaking correlates to the English that we know, right? Or how do you know language is objective in that world? Things like that. Well, technically the question itself is not invalid. It takes prerequisites to assume and adequately deduce, and there's no reason to believe them, so we would just, out of the basis of utility, we would not utilize them. Same thing goes for your question. What's up?
I said I get what you mean. So, like, what would be my prerequisite with this statement I made?
The prerequisite would be, like, the blade just nullifies the ability out of sheer just whatever reason. Where, yeah, I agree that it nullifies the ability. I think it contradicts the ability, right? Because we don't need any prerequisites to assume that. Your, like, idea that the characters just for some reason, or like, the weapons that they have nullify the blade somehow, you'd even have to demonstrate why that is, right? Or how that even works. But it's just like, it's a prerequisite that you're assuming that it just basically contradicts what I'm saying, which doesn't need any prerequisites. And somehow, without even knowing the process of how this thing works, it just all of a sudden nullifies things and just gets rid of the concept or idea.
I'll just like clarify something. I was talking about the people being chatty, not the weapon. Like I just used both the other contradiction of the weapon as a second example. So that was like an example. I didn't mean
same thing applies.
Yeah. But isn't it also then a prerequisite to be saying the scales like power-wise? Because you saying there's some point where they weren't strong enough to do it previously, but they could do it later?
It's not a prerequisite. It's a conclusion that follows from this.
You see, that's what I was assuming my one would be. Like, I don't understand the difference.
Yours is a prerequisite in the basis of the reason that this thing functions is because of X. Mine is not a prerequisite because I say this thing functions, therefore it leads to X.
Oh, okay. So, you're saying because this outcome happened, it must be out of Earth, right?
I'd say that probably is the most likely conclusion. Like, there's that's a little bit of a strong word, must. But I'd say that on the basis of just pure reason and utility, that's the most likely conclusion that one could reach.
I want to ask another thing real quick. So, like, we'll just move on from that for a second. Does your character's sword scale to this, or is it your character who scales to this? So I got to ask that.
My character's sword or thought?
So both.
I would say that, like, both would have to be. If it's the thing is, both, I would say the sword and the character scales to this, because A, the sword can basically destroy duality such as, like, immortality, And I'd say that the duality of this thing not being able to be wieldable and them wielding it is also a duality in and of itself that applies more to the person in general, because the person is the one that's affected by this duality. The blade is affected by its own duality, right? So both of these blades... Oh, what's up?
No, I just said yeah.
Yeah, both of these blades are, like, affected by some sort of duality, and both seem to, like, basically break that. So, yeah, it'd be both.
One last bit. So you say that these work on, like, the concept of duality, right?
The concept of duality?
Yeah, so it would have to be the concept of duality that is higher. So the duality has many different forms, and some of them are massively higher, some are massively lower.
I'd say the dualities are conceptual in nature.
Are they?
I believe that there is no, like, empirical or, like, naturalistic form of a duality that exists outside of human perception or, like, a metaphysical concept. The reason, like, I'm sure you would agree most of the tiering system utilizes something called Platonism.
Not most, just the, like, Outerversal portions.
Yeah. The idea of dualities existing as this kind of degree is like a Platonist concept. Not saying that it's like it relies on Platonism to exist, but it is a Platonist concept in nature. That was the guy who, like, Plato was the guy who founded that idea. What's up? What's up?
I said I know who Plato is. You don't need to go.
Yeah, he was the one who founded that idea. Him and the ancient Greek philosophers. So it pretty much dualities, I don't think, are represented in anything like in the physical world in terms of anything other than human perception. Right? We perceive concepts, like abstract concepts, like duality. Their existence is like purely a metaphysical and conceptual in nature.
But wouldn't a manifestation of the concept of duality also contain a section of duality and fit that definition?
What do you mean by a manifestation?
So when we say the concept of duality, like, shows itself throughout the living world for us to make these deductions, we are saying that we have observed something which is
the concept itself, right? Doesn't, like, show itself, but what we, like, interpret to be the concept, in terms of just, like, pure like night and day, life and death, etc. The concept of duality isn't implicitly in the physical world for those things to exist, but we created the word and the conceptualization of duality to basically explain these different phenomena. So I don't think that, like, their manifestation would... What's up?
Isn't that how your sword works?
No.
So I'm asking that because I'll just read it down again. The mortal sword cannot be drawn. So you're saying that this is an example of something that would be duality as opposed to something that is duality itself, sort of thing.
This would be an example of, like, them just, like, contradicting what we understand to be a duality. That's literally, like, what the scan is saying. It's contradicting something that we would conceive and know to be a duality, right? However, just because I think that even though they're contradicting the idea of a duality, and in the metaphysical and non-physical plane, that would lead to Outerversal, like, inherently, right? That doesn't necessarily mean I have to agree within the physical world itself, right? That these concepts manifest, like, physically. I don't think they do. I think they're conceptualization and I think they're conceptual and metaphysical in nature. I think they're conceptual and metaphysical by necessity. I don't think they would be anything else.
So you're saying the sword can be physically drawn but not conceptually drawn? Is that what you're trying to say? I'm trying to put this together.
That's a really weird interpretation of what I'm saying.
That's why I asked. Like,
I'm saying that these things, dualities, don't exist in any other form besides conceptual and metaphysical. They don't exist in any other form. And they contradict the duality. Meaning contradicting the concept of a duality is inherent for them to, like, be doing this. Because when you say, like, exist in the physical world, that implies that, like, dualities are like bound by the laws of physics and things like that, which I don't think is the case. I don't think like things like concepts and metaphysics are at all bound by like physical limitations of the natural world.
Yeah, so further explain what I meant by that when I said exists in a physical world. I meant like you can go around and find examples of it manifesting in the sense of, well, an example using something else, you can't touch, feel, taste, or whatever. Something like gravity, we 100% know exists in the real world. I know it's not a conceptual thing, but it's not something we can measure, test, or anything else. We can only estimate based on observations of surroundings. We know it exists, we can't do anything about it. And that's the same sort of thing with concepts. We have evidence concepts exist and such, but we can't actually like pick them up, take them home with us.
Yeah, we have like, just because you have evidence of this thing existing, I'm a little confused on what your broader point is. But like, what's up?
So my broader point is this like evidence that something existing in the physical world, being not to be in the concept itself, could also be the interpretation of your scan.
No, I agree that the interpretation or like the idea of the thing, like that people have, could exist in the physical world, right? However, the thing itself, right, existing in the physical world just doesn't make any sense. It literally contradicts the concept of metaphysics.
Dualities can't exist in the physical world, right?
Their actual forms. No, they cannot. I don't think that this blade in my people. I obviously think that this is fiction, right? So you're asking me, can these things exist in the physical world? Not in like reality, but like maybe in fiction that there are some like conceptual, metaphysical, and spiritual things that can come down. But that's why I do think that even though these characters are Outerversal, they can still interact and basically exist in the physical world. You know, it's a fictional fucking verse, right?
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Yeah, that's basically, it's an argument from necessity, right?
Yeah. Alright. I won't go any further on that point. Other than that first stalling on that, so let's show how rapidly Outerversal AP's going. Well, yeah, you can move on from that.
Alright, no problem.
Do you want to hear my AP?
Sure.
I ain't got any.
Oh. Is it a baseline outer tournament?
No, the thing has an Outerversal cap. It doesn't have a minimum. And in case you're wondering, this was brought up in some other debate. This is the first time I've used this character.
Alright, no problem. Go on. Why don't you think my character would win, though?
I'm just going to presume your character, you can correct me if I'm wrong, your character needs to, let's just say, attack mine to be able to do anything, am I right? By attack, I mean, like, your character needs to use that sword, walk up and hit, something like that?
No. He has will manip and things like that.
Alright, cool. Now, what does this will manip, or whatever you want to use, like, how does that affect something that's made of information?
Information is, like, inherently, like, conceptual in nature. I do think it is, yes.
It's not for my character, because info for my character is outside the conceptual.
Yeah, I think that would contradict, like, information as a concept in general.
No. Concepts exist in the verse. Information exists somewhere else in the verse. My character's part of that.
Yeah, so if you believe that, like, information, right, is for some reason beyond conceptualization, then how would you be able to conceptualize your character's version of information?
Simple. You go into a more meta standard than you would for conceptualization.
What? But, like, that's okay, explain what you mean by that.
So, in the same sort of way that you would say, atoms are building blocks for cells and cells are building blocks for people, I would say that the information in my verse is the building blocks for concepts, and then the concept is the building blocks for everything else after. So the reason why is because it's just further in depth, and you can't say it's made of concept, it's the other way around.
Yeah, so I think the difference between cells and atoms is that we can still conceptualize and understand them because they're bound by the same physical limitations. Oh, okay. Well, I'd also, the analogy doesn't address, well, I guess I didn't, create a critique, so my bad. I guess the critique I would say is that you can't necessarily analyze or interpret what this information means if it's beyond conceptualization, because conceptualization is literally your process of understanding things and where you draw information from. So if it's beyond, it's like me saying that, what's a great example? That I can see a character who's beyond sight.
I guess your eyes are OP as hell.
I guess. Do you think that's possible?
Yes, I do think it's possible.
Well, yeah, I agree that it's possible too, but how would you be able to, demonstrate or basically understand that? How would you be able to understand the concept of information if it's beyond the concept itself? Because this is a little bit different than us understanding, breaking a duality or being outerversal, which is beyond the physical limitations, even though we can't conceptualize the physical. What's up?
I was gonna just say that the characters who say this is the SCP Foundation, and they see things much further and bigger than this. It's kind of like a drop in the bucket.
Yeah, I think they can just be wrong.
I don't think they could be wrong with their track record.
Yeah, I think that if it's proven by necessity, it can't be wrong. Yeah.
So this is what I'm gonna say, right?
Yeah.
I'm just gonna say this right. Since my characters have history already looking at these type of things, have seen things much further, have an amazing track record, to say that they are wrong is against the general consensus of claim this, which means that you'd have to prove that part.
Yeah, that's what obviously I hope you wouldn't assume that I'm saying you're wrong without justifying my answer, right? I have a justification for why they would be wrong, because the thing literally contradicts anything. It doesn't mean anything. When you say beyond the concept of information, or basically, yeah, beyond the concept of information, but you have information about it, right? That doesn't mean anything. That's a blanket statement, right? That doesn't have any implications, nor does it have anything. It's what we call a syntax error, right? You can't do anything with it. That's like saying true and not true. Well, I guess you can technically say, well, this thing has both properties of being false and true. It's not the same as being true and false at the same time.
Do you think information can't be incorrect and still be information?
I think information, what do you define information to be? Because I think if information is proven, or what we perceive to be information is proven incorrect, I don't think it's information.
No, I'm going more fundamental and just things we can see. I think hopefully that just was getting across. We're not just going to things we can see when we say information beyond concepts. But
is that actually something you're saying, information beyond concepts?
Yeah.
I think concepts and information are mutually inclusive. So I think that that's, if they are using an idea of information or a definition of information that's not mutually inclusive with concepts, then I think it's up to you, or basically your burden, to prove what they mean by that.
I don't think so. So can you just double check what you just said?
Yeah, I did. If they're using a idea of concepts that doesn't correspond with our idea of concepts or our idea of information, right? It seems to have different properties. It seems to have different objective things about it. Then I think it's your burden to define what they mean by this thing.
Yeah. Okay. So I think I get what you mean, but it's kind of
okay. Do you want me to explain it a little bit better?
Yes, I will. I like you to explain it with more detail on what you want me to say from it. Because otherwise it just sounds like a statement. I'm not sure what to do with that statement.
Yeah. So I'll basically give you my statement, analyze the statement, and tell you what I'm asking of you, right?
Cool.
The normal idea of information, to my knowledge in the physical world, is mutually inclusive with the idea of concept, right? Or the concepts in general, right? This being the case, right? If in the SCP Foundation, this so-called information is beyond concepts, right? That seems to contradict our view and our notions of concepts, which is fine, right? It's completely fine that it is. But since it contradicts our view and notion of concepts, we don't have, unless we have an adequate definition for this thing, an idea of what this would entail or what this would be. Because we can't say it's like similar to information because it already contradicts one of the most fundamental things about it. So I think the burden is up to you to provide what the SCP Foundation defines this information to be and what it even is.
So the part about like asking what it needs to be defined by, like that bit is like how I'm describing it currently. That's not changing the part beyond concepts because it's a literal place beyond concepts, more fundamental. We don't need to go over what they're defining it as. What we need to go over is the evidence of why this is, and the bit you're also asking is why is like this in the SCP when in real life it may not be like this. I think that's what you're asking, right?
If you don't, I think you do need to define this, because if you don't define this, then it's a blanket.
No, I'm saying I don't need to define it because it's the same thing I've been saying over and over.
And just like
the definition is what we're like arguing over, so that part, that I have to prove that it can exist, not the part
I'm sure it's possible that it can exist, but for you to make any like conclusions or rationales from it, it wouldn't be like a logical thing to do.
So the bit I said earlier that was uncontested was the information is in the SCP place is more fundamental than concept. The bit you were then contending is they shouldn't be able to know that because it's a logical contradiction of them knowing something. Like you can't know something that's impossible to know.
I was more arguing for the fact that the idea or concept of information. Now, I can't attack that part. There's a lot of things to attack. I'm just, I don't think you want to go into a shotgun match, right?
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you want me to attack as many, like, problems and critiques that I have of that as possible at one time, we could do that.
Allow me to explain it this way, right? And this sort of just, like, ends most things. So in SCP, each narrative in SCP is how much you can write on a single page. Well, not a single page, actually 10,000 pages. It's how much you can write on a single page and whatever truth manip of the tiering system you can put on it. That's shown in a SCP I can go get for you. Then the writers of the SCP, which would be this one proposal one, define everything in the verse. So when it's written down that all this is how it is in the articles, that's how it is, and it's because it's written to be that way. So I can get you information for all of that, all the scans in the world you could ask for.
Yeah, I think that could be an incorrect information.
That could be an incorrect information. What do you mean by that one?
Yeah, I think that, like, well, not incorrect information, my bad, just basically information that's not information. Yeah, I think that they could have, like, ideas or say things that could be wrong. Like, I think that fiction can be wrong about things, such as the idea of information that's beyond the concepts of nature. I'm just not seeing an argument for that. You're just,
that's a huge claim. You just said that it doesn't matter what I say, fiction can be wrong. That was your claim.
Oh yeah, I definitely think fiction can be wrong. Do you want me to justify that?
No, I don't want you to justify can fiction be wrong. I want you the point you're making here is I can't prove it because fiction is wrong. When you say fiction is wrong, that is a huge claim against this. You get what I mean?
that fiction can be wrong. That's a huge claim against the general consensus. I don't care about the general consensus.
You don't care about the general consensus?
No, I think that like the general consensus could also be wrong.
General consensus could be wrong, but you know what's wrong with that?
What?
It puts everything out of like you. It makes everything pointless.
No, my things don't rely on
Yes,
general consensus. No, they don't.
They do. Yes, they very much do.
How so?
So when something's a general consensus, it's the belief that something's already established, and to prove otherwise, you'd be against the burden of proof. You'd have to do it yourself. Now, to do this through your verse, you've said, oh, concept of duality, logical reasoning, okay. So you built up a general consensus based on standard information.
Wait, by general consensus, I thought you meant like appeal to popularity.
No. General consensus is not appeal to popularity at all.
Okay. A general consensus meaning I've established like logical reasoning and all that. Define general consensus exactly.
General consensus in the point of all evidence points to a single conclusion, so that if you were to suggest otherwise, you'd have to be.
Oh, if you mean that by general consensus, then I have no problem with that. I thought you meant something entirely different.
Yeah, I was like.
Because in
you're going against every scan ever used ever.
Yeah, no, like in politics, like general consensus is like what like people generally believe this thing to be. But yeah.
Yeah. So going back to what I was saying, there's a mini tangent right there. The last point I brought up, the consensus thing, was my verse is literally able to write down, proof manip, define the things inside of it, and that's why information is the way it is. I can get the scans showing that. You haven't yet requested it. If you do request it, I can go get it for you.
Yeah, I would request it, but again, you're just saying that this thing exists, right? I'm saying that like this thing doesn't exist on the basis of it just contradicts our notion of what this thing is, and I'm saying that like even if it did somehow exist, you wouldn't be able to adequately define it, so to make a conclusion from it would not necessarily be possible at all, to my knowledge. Right? For example, my thing, like with my characters, I can adequately define what they mean by certain things, like life and death and mortality, severance, and all that. Right? And so I can make a conclusion and basically make a chain of reasoning regarding it. With you, it doesn't seem that you can adequately define information. In fact, correct me if I'm wrong, so I'm not being uncharitable, but you said yourself that you don't even need to define it, you just need to prove that it exists. Well, I do think you need to define it, because you're making conclusions off the basis of it.
No, I think you misinterpreted what I said. So, what I did say was I didn't need to define it, but the reason why was because you were asking for me to define and repeat something I had already said at the time. So that's why I was saying, I don't need to define that, because you were asking me something that I'd already said. So what you're asking now is...
Maybe I missed it. But... Yeah.
So you were asking me, like earlier, you were asking me about, can you define what behind concepts? How can that be with contradiction? I said, well, actually, no, I've already done that, such and such. That's why I said that before. And that's why I said I didn't need to.
Okay, so make your conclusion, make your argument, and we'll just attack it from here, because I think we're going into meta debating right now, which I want and can do. But just make your broader point, and then we'll attack that.
Yeah, sure. So you just conclude this point about the information?
I'm not concluded. I'm just trying to understand. Maybe giving me the broader point will help me better understand what you're trying to say.
Yeah. So broader point in the verse, what they write down in the narratives, which are the articles, that becomes true. This is shown by another article where someone was being nervous that they did that exact thing. In the articles, they also write down the information being higher and beyond that of the concept. In fact, it was higher than all concepts. And I can also get concepts and narratives and stuff like that. The information was higher than that. So, despite the logical inconsistency that you are bringing up, the fact that it's written that way by the narrative of the actual SCPs, because it's proof manipped into that, then it has to be true. Because otherwise, you'd be saying that every scans and everything you're looking at is against the entire general consensus of scans and stuff. Like, you'd have to prove there is no possible way to get these to be the way they are.
Ah, okay, I see. Yeah, in that case, like going against the general consensus of logical reasoning and such, your character is inherently, like, what they're saying is inherently correct, right? Even though there could be a logical inconsistency with that, it has to be true on the basis of they have truth in it, they write it down, and they wrote this thing down, so it has to be true by necessity.
It's like, imagine God made it this way. There is nothing we can do to say otherwise. That's the way it is.
Yeah, I don't think you can reach any conclusions from this. I think that, like, even if we accepted this could be the case, like, I don't think it'd be fair to reach any conclusions off the basis of this, because it literally contradicts any kind of meaning. If you say information beyond concepts, and I pointed this out earlier in the debate, we could say, maybe that's the case, right? But what conclusions you can draw from that and what that even means is up in the air. It's like if I say, like, pizza flies over the West in Batman. Does that statement exist in reality if I have truth manip and, like, make it such? I guess sure, right? But what do you draw from that? What, like, relevance does that have to anything? You don't know, because it's a fucking, like, scrambled nation of words. It doesn't mean anything other than, like, the fucking words themselves may have individual meaning, but the sentence itself doesn't seem to correspond or, like, represent anything in reality. I think the same thing exists with your page. That, like,
so I think how I disagree with that is we have to only use things that are established about this information because it acts differently. If it's not established, we can't use it. If it is established, we can use it. Simple as that. Because then again, it's the same argument of it's written down.
I'm not disagreeing that it's not established, right? I'm saying that even with the establishments made, that, like, we still can't reach any conclusions off the basis of it. I agree that this thing could What's that? No, go on.
I was going to say, so if it's shown higher than concepts, which, by the way, you still haven't asked me to put down, like, you need to ask something, but if it's said higher than concepts, and that's established, that's not the bit you're contesting here being established, you're saying it can't be drawn to any conclusion.
Not that I'm aware of. No, I think it's blanket.
What do you mean by blanket?
It's meaningless. It has no meaning other than, like, the fucking individual words themselves. It's like the example that I gave. Pizza flies easy over the West, therefore much Batman. What does that statement mean, Kratos?
I think that's a very different interpretation.
I think
not interpretation. That's the wrong word.
I think that it's
quickly Google that word.
I think that's literally the same thing. I think that information beyond concepts and pizza flies easy over the West is literally the same thing in nature. It's like a bunch of scramblizations of words and such that could exist in reality, but you can't draw any meaning or conclusion from because it's literally blanket.
No, I feel like, okay, so this is another thing. First off, do you want me to do a shotgun? Do you want me not to do a shotgun? You decide.
Do whatever you want.
Yeah, I really don't want to do a shotgun, but I'm going
to. Just do, if whatever help, I'm tired of people, I'm not saying you'll do this, I'm tired of people making excuses. So just, like, do whatever, like, best helps you.
I don't think it best helps me, I just think it's going to cause more problems, but...
Alright.
Yeah, the, like, a statement you said, could you say that again quickly? I don't want to say anything.
Yes, okay, so, pizza flies easy over the West, therefore much Batman. Okay? Blanket statement has no meaning, doesn't mean anything. It could exist in reality, but what we would entail or differ from that, basically, we couldn't fucking, like, deduce. Same thing with information beyond concepts. I guess that thing could exist in reality if the thing has truth in it, but what you take from that is the question itself. I don't think you can, like, draw any conclusions from that either.
So this is why I think you can. So I'll just quickly explain. So you said when we at the very start of this point, I claimed my character to be unaffected by all things, and you mentioned, oh, your character can use, for an example, you said like will manip on concepts, right?
Not on concepts, just will manip, but yeah, he has will manip.
You said something conceptual, and that's why this whole conceptual point was brought up. But anyway, so yeah, then I was defining why my thing was beyond concepts. So if my thing's beyond concepts and that's established but can't be interpreted, you'd have to just use the information as it is, ironically. You'd have to just use it as it is.
Wait, your character's beyond concepts?
I'm saying my character's more fundamental than concept. I should say it like that.
What does that mean, more fundamental than concepts?
That's the analogy I used earlier, remember?
Yeah, I understand you used it earlier, but there was a lot of things discussed earlier, and sometimes I lose track.
I used one analogy, and the analogy was the cells versus atoms, where atoms are more fundamental than cells, but both are building blocks for a person.
So these concepts, right, or like this information is more fundamental than, or these concepts are more fundamental than the information because the concepts make up the information.
No, other way around.
Oh, okay. So, yeah, I think the highest degree to which we understand something is literally conceptual. I actually don't think that, like, anything beyond concepts or more, as you put it, more fundamental than concepts we can even understand. I think that, like, for you to say, and this is the reason, I definitely agree that, like, things like transcending concepts or, like, being, breaking them down or basically, like, not being bound by them. You could defer some information from that, but not much information. We could defer that they're outerversal. We could defer that this would be the entailment of that. But what they would do, how they would react to things, is a little bit more like a nuance. I don't think we can answer properly. For you to say that this information is more fundamental than concepts itself, I don't know how you can derive any kind of okay, I don't know how you can derive any kind of statement or conclusion from that.
Well, don't worry about it. Because I'm just reading off the articles that the people in your own words, right, from your argument, it's fiction, it's the way they do it, right? So I'm just using that for the SCP Foundation, full of people who make us look like little dum-dums, you know?
Yeah, I understand that, like, what they're saying could be the case, and maybe even is the case. But what that entails, or what the inference that comes from that is, I don't think you can know.
Yeah, so you're talking about, like, what a person standardly wouldn't be able to do, and I'm saying it's not a standard person, it's the SCP Foundation. It is.
Yes, but you're the one making conclusions and rationale from it, not the SCP.
I'm just reading off what they've already said.
You're gonna, like, obviously if you're bringing up the information, you're trying to use it to scale, right? You're gonna be making some inference from that, right? Or else there'd be no reason for you to bring it up. The SCP Foundation is not making any inference that I'm aware of from this on the basis of, oh, this is what this means, or this would lead to this, right? You are.
Sorry to interrupt you, but they actually did. Thank God Mr. Ghost was helping me out not too long ago. There was an SCP, a different one, completely different, unrelated as well. SCP 6820. So what happened was 682 had everything removed, including his concept. But his information still stuck around afterwards. His information carried on, infected everything, and then came back as soon as it wanted to try and prevent it. So the whole point of that one was the concepts and information were two completely separate things, because all the things that were his concept had gone. The only thing left was his information.
Yeah, so they've reached the conclusion and the hypothesis, but we've already established that they probably have more knowledge. And you're reaching a different conclusion or hypothesis than them.
No, I'm repeating theirs. So, just as an analogy here, if Donald Trump was to read Albert Einstein's theory of relativity, does it become wrong?
What?
So you're saying, because I'm saying something the SCP Foundation did, and I'm not as smart as them, it's the equivalent of saying Donald Trump was to read Albert Einstein's theory of relativity is wrong because I'm not as smart as that. Just Donald Trump isn't.
No, the thing is that you can you can definitely understand, right, what they're saying when they mean this thing, right? Or basically when they like mean something, you can interpret the language that they're using, right? But I don't think that based on your dimensional inferiority to them, and your intellect inferiority that's on a dimensional scale to them, you can make yourself any inferences from the information. For example, I think that like Donald Trump trying to make any I don't even think the analogy is equivocal because one information is of things that's in the physical world, right, that we can understand. The other is information. I've mentioned this before. Information that like supersedes our own rationale and our own ideas of things, right?
I think the theory of relativity, which is actually all about gravity, acceleration, and how it works on time space, I think that's beyond the comprehension of Donald Trump in every way, sense, or form.
I don't think so, actually.
I think maybe Trump is a placeholder for someone who's thick.
No, I'm sorry, but like when you say it's beyond his concept, just because you don't understand something doesn't mean it's beyond you. This is inherently beyond you. That's the difference. Donald Trump, I'm sure if he put like 4 years of pure math research into it, he could probably understand it. Just because he doesn't currently grasp it doesn't mean it's technically quote unquote beyond him on the dimensional scale. This information, this stuff is beyond you, literally beyond like your corporeal form in every shape, manner, and form, right? You are making inferences from that. That just doesn't seem right.
Of other people's conclusions, though. So the issue is that you keep saying, I'm the one deriving this, but I'm not. I'm the one who's repeating what's already been said. So here's the thing. I can imagine I wouldn't say even that, because some people have disabilities, but let's say some people who clearly have no deal doing any physics, science, maths, or anything like that could go on an article made by Albert Einstein and read out the result. And that's basically what I'm doing. I'm reading out the result. I'm not going through the paper, going through every detail and verifying each bit. I'm simply repeating what's established. And going against what is established is one of those things.
And the result is that information is more fundamental than concepts, right?
Yeah, that is the result.
Okay. I'll agree that that's the result, but again, I don't think you can make any inferences or conclusions from that.
I don't mean to say this, by the way, but I think it's being quite pedantic at that point, asking, because I think there is so much that's being said saying this all goes to this conclusion. There's so much evidence for it.
Bro, I've already said that, like, I agree that their conclusion could be correct, right? I agree that the inferences they made from information that we can't grasp would release or basically re-release a conclusion, right? In which they have constructed that could exist in their verse. I agree with that. However, this concept, this conclusion is still inherently beyond you, right? You can't make inferences from it.
I'm not. I'm repeating what's established. An inference is making a deduction. I'm repeating what's established.
Wait, so you're literally repeating this thing, right? This thing to be the case for no reason. You're not going to do anything with this information. You're literally not going to use it for any hacks or scaling at all. Because if you do, that contradicts what you're about to say. Because you are making conclusions off of this information.
That's not what I'm saying at all. That really isn't my dude.
Okay, then just get on to your broader point. What relevance does this conclusion have to anything?
So I was saying that I don't think there's a thing your character could do to affect someone who is at such a standard.
Why is the standard inherently higher than mine?
No. I'm saying that I don't think so. So I don't know what your character can do. If you think your character can do something, can you show me otherwise? But at the moment, from my experience personally, I don't see anything like that.
Yes. Okay, so you are reaching a conclusion off the basis of this. Because of the information that's released, you're making a conclusion that you don't think that my character can touch it. That even an I think statement.
That's part of my premise, right? My premise is this point, right? So I'm just really going into more detail for my premises this entire point.
So when you said I was wrong on the basis of you were going to make an inference based off this information, I was not wrong. You are making an inference on the basis of this information.
No, that's a... Oh my god.
Yes, that is what's happening. You're making a conclusion, right, off the... Okay, you're saying that this thing is established to be true, right? Since it's established to be true, I don't think that your character could do X and Y to mine, right?
Until shown otherwise was the end of the statement.
So that's still, like, regardless, that's still a conclusion off the basis of the information.
Actually, it's not. How is it a conclusion when you haven't got an end result?
Yeah, you do have an end result.
You have. The whole point is it's a reaction to what you have.
The conclusion is that you don't think that anything could happen to yours, or that, like, my character can do anything. That's a conclusion, yes.
It's still established otherwise.
Yes, that's still a conclusion.
It's because it's incomplete, it's not an inference, because it doesn't have relevance yet, because it relies on your character as well.
I'm not saying the whole thing is an inference. I'm saying you're using inferences, like, to make this conclusion. That's what a chain of reasoning is.
I'm repeating a statement. Inside the statement has logical reasoning. Inside the logical reasoning is what I'm using for the inference. Basically what's coming here. But parts of the logical reasoning cannot be called an inference if all of it is just staying there, something already said otherwise.
Hold up, my mic went low there for a second. Can you repeat that?
Yeah. I was on a roll too. So what I was saying is, the parts that you're claiming to be inference are the same things that I'm saying are not inference, because those parts are ones that were already established. I'm taking what's said by these other people, the conclusion of other people we agree on that shouldn't happen, and then I'm saying your character probably isn't what is going to affect my character. Because
you agree that
your character can, but until shown otherwise, that's what I'm going to have to conclude.
You agree that an inference is natural deduction, right?
I don't really think I've deduced anything, but I think I've just repeated. I've just established a statement.
Yeah, you are. You're saying that. Okay, you don't think that my character can touch yours off of the basis of this information, right? That is an inference. That is a deduction. I don't, like, by definition it is. You're taking two pieces of information, comparing them, and saying, off the basis of these two pieces of information, I don't think X would lead to Y. That, I don't know how else that, I don't know what else that would be.
So, the issue of a deduction is you normally need to have, like, a definitive conclusion. Mine's not definitive.
Yours is not?
Definitive, because it's based on your character still. That's what I'm like.
Wait, why do you need to have a definitive
conclusion? This point's really bad because.
Wait, why do you need to have a definitive conclusion? That's a very strong claim. I have never seen that.
No, for a deduction you should. Otherwise, it's not a deduction.
What, like, you take natural deduction to be like taking two pieces of information, reaching a conclusion, or like reasoning, right?
Your mic just changed. You okay?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, your mic just changed.
Okay. Basically, like, correct me if I'm wrong, like, a deduction is like inferences that, like, basically leads to like a general principle or something like that, right?
Yes.
Yeah. I think that there can be things like natural deductions, like things that are just basically lesser form. I think that even a conclusion that's not definitive can still be a deduction. I don't see what the contradiction there is. Like, unless you can provide me some contradiction in terms of, like, a semantical meaning of that, then I don't see any reason to say that, like, this or can't happen.
Yeah, I just want to double check. Do you want me to, say a deduction that's inconclusive and makes logical sense? Is that what you're asking? You went underwater.
You're saying that even, like, originally you disagreed with the idea that it was a conclusion, if I'm correct. Then you went on to say that, like, it's not a definitive conclusion, right? I don't see any contradiction with the idea that something without a definitive conclusion can still necessarily not be a deduction. I think most conclusions in science are definitive by necessity. I think most of them aren't. I don't think anything is definitive.
Okay, I get what you mean.
Yes.
Sorry about that. It took me a while to catch on. So, the issue with most deductions that you're on about is there is some information ironically again, some information gathered from these conclusions. Some of them can even be the information being that this method for finding the conclusion is meaningless, something like that. But you have a meaningful conclusion in the end because of the other information it's given with it. Like experiments have something like that. So for this one here, I'm repeating a statement and then I'm basically asking, even though I'm saying I don't think anything your character can do. But in other words, I'm also asking you to show otherwise of whether or not your character can do anything like this, which basically means that the whole premise is I haven't seen anything to do. I haven't seen your character do this type of thing.
Oh, I see.
Because otherwise, there isn't a meaningful conclusion because it's not finished.
All I'm saying is that I'm not seeing any reason to accept what you're saying is true. It's true about the nature of your god, right? In terms of it would lead to this thing. Now, I will say this: I can engage with that, but I think I made my point of why I think it's nonsensical. But I think we've been on this for a while, so do you want me to I think that me arguing what my character could do to your character and off the basis of the description that you gave contradicts everything that I'm trying to talk about here. Because it literally contradicts the idea that I think this thing is nonsensical. It doesn't mean anything. So me, and I'm saying that you can't make inferences or deductions from that. So for me to try to make an inference and a deduction off the basis of what you said that I think is nonsensical is literally me doing what I'm critiquing you for. So...
Yeah, but here's the thing, right? It's fiction and we're going to have to go with the flow, so just go with what these people say.
I think...
Because the sake of the debate needs to
continue. I think some fiction, like I said earlier, can be wrong. I don't care to justify that during the debate. I can justify that afterwards. But, yeah, I think some fiction can be wrong. Even though,
point for the judges.
But basically... What's up?
I was going to say, I get what you mean. Basically, to continue this debate is against what your whole thing is, but for the sake of continuing the debate, you're going to have to go against
By the way,
I don't mind to go either way.
Is the rules, even if I can't affect your character, what's to say that your character can affect mine?
So I can show characters... Well, okay. The information manipulation can warp someone's very being and sense of identity, and it's that sort of thing that I think my character would do to yours.
I think our characters are beyond I think our characters are outerversal, meaning they're beyond identity as a concept in general.
I can show a character out of tier getting affected by this. Outside.
Yeah, this is the same problem that I have with other people. Just because this thing happens with respect to another fictional verse doesn't necessarily mean it'll apply to every fictional verse. Just because you show a different character getting affected by something that just doesn't seem to be likely or doesn't seem to happen anywhere else doesn't mean that same thing will affect my character, especially since our characters come from two different sources of information.
So I think, earlier I was saying that you're being quite pedantic about what you're saying. I think this is kind of going on that trend because I know what you mean what you're saying. There isn't evidence, but then at the same time I think asking for absolute evidence is one of those impossible things in life you're not going to get. Because otherwise, we may as well say our characters just can't interact, and that's the end of the discussion.
That could be a thing. Yeah, I definitely think that's a likely possibility.
There's no rule about verse equalization. Should we go and ask about this, or should we carry on? I don't know. What do you want to do with that?
I don't like verse equalization. I think it's weird because, I mean, at that point we'd have to equalize everything like AP and such, which I don't think would be consistent with what people are expecting.
What are y'all asking exactly?
No. We'll ask you guys when we're ready, okay?
All right. I mean, I don't agree with it. You might. But then at that point,
I was going to clarify what I meant by verse equalization. I didn't mean like AP and stuff like that. I meant like when they say like concepts and such, unless shown otherwise, they mean the same sort of source.
Yeah,
like,
I don't.
Concepts, those type of things.
I don't even agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So if you don't agree with that, then can our characters do anything to each other ever and be proven to do anything ever?
I'm not sure. I don't think that would be my burden to like suggest.
No, it was a question.
Yeah, like okay. Then I don't know.
Well, this could be the most irrelevant topic ever in fiction.
Yeah, like the answer is I don't know. Do you have a suggestion? Or I mean, I don't care. Like, I've never agreed with the idea of verse equalization, and I can talk about that after. But like.
Yeah, I know what you mean. So, like how I thought about it was if something had identical or similar fundamentals, then I would say that they'd be equalized. But I understand your point of there is no absolute proof to prove these type of things because no such absolute proof exists for any character ever.
Yeah. I mean, in general, yeah. I don't know. I don't think. Is there a rule on it? Like, let me check.
No, there isn't. But we can look at it. The only thing is, they say like equal potency in the rules. That's it.
Yeah.
Doesn't
You
say.
want me to read the rules?
You guys have vague as fuck rules. Okay, like you.
Like there's rules.
Thank you all for watching. As I said at the start of this video, check out Kenny or Zanji's channel. The link will be here in the end of the video and in the description. Also check out the Temple of Verity YouTube channel, as it has other debates on it. In fact, this debate was actually posted on the Temple of Verity channel a week earlier, so if you check out that channel, you most likely get to see the debates beforehand. Also, thank you to my friend, who are also linked just here, who was able to record this for me, as I was not the one who recorded this debate. And with that, thank you all for watching.